Excellencies, colleagues, dear friends, it is a pleasure to welcome you to the virtual discussion presented by the Permanent Mission of Armenia to the UN on the occasion of the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of the Crime of Genocide, as well as the International Human Rights Day. The purpose of today's conversation is to discuss the method of genocide prevention from the perspective of mass media and communications, which have a central role in shaping attitudes, public discourse, and actions around the risk of atrocity crimes. Now I have the honor to introduce the video message of His Excellency Mr. Ara Ayvazian, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia, on the occasion of the observance of the International Day of 9 December.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, today marks the 72nd anniversary since the adoption of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, which empowered the international community with legal framework to prevent and punish what used to be a crime without a name, and came to be codified as the acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. Adopted a day before the landmark human rights document, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Genocide Convention thus comes to represent the first international agreement on human rights. Since 1998, Armenia has been leading the international efforts within the United Nations to underpin the significance of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, as well as to construct solid foundations for prevention. In 2015, the UN General Assembly unanimously adopted a resolution initiated by Armenia, which proclaimed the 9th of December as an International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of the Crime of Genocide and of the prevention of that crime. The establishment and the regular observance of the International Day of the 9th December adds to the continued efforts of Armenia to promote consolidated international action against the crime of genocide. Today, I am honored to reconfirm, in my capacity as Minister of Foreign Affairs, Armenia's firm resolve to continue to support the mutually reinforcing agendas of genocide prevention and the promotion and protection of human rights. As a member of the UN Human Rights Council, Armenia has declared its strong commitment to prevention of identity-based hate crimes. We all know it too well that as an ultimate crime, genocide is preceded by discrimination, exclusion, intolerance, persistent violation of human rights and freedoms, incitement of hatred on ethnic and religious grounds. The frequent lack of understanding of the importance to timely detect early signs, such as manifestations of hate speech and incendiary rhetoric amplified by the modern means of mass media, and often politically motivated reluctance to address them properly and in timely manner, has limited the collective ability to undertake early action and deliver adequate response to promotion and cultivation of hatred and intolerance. Dear colleagues, 2020 will go into history as a year of major grievances and vulnerabilities. It's been particularly challenging for Armenia and Armenians all over the world. As the world was focused on fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, Azerbaijan, with direct involvement of Turkey and foreign terrorist fighters and mercenaries from the Middle East, launched a large-scale military offensive against Nagorno-Karabakh with a clear genocidal intent. State-led policies of denigrating and insulting the victims of past atrocities and construction of distorted historical narratives that seek to justify the deliberate destruction of the Armenian cultural heritage in the region fuel interethnic tensions and undermine prospects of reconciliation. Dear friends, today more than ever, we need genuine commitment and unity of the entire international community to develop a strong and effective system of risk assessment and early warning mechanism. We need to promote education of human rights, tolerance and culture of peaceful coexistence. Here, I would like to emphasize the role of media and communication workers. Their influence and responsibility are becoming increasingly significant in the modern world of information technologies. They stand at the heart of early warning mechanisms to detect and prevent crimes against humanity. The resolution on genocide prevention adopted by the UN Human Rights Council in June 2020 highlights that free, diverse, and independent media able to operate freely would significantly reduce the risk of genocide. This is a crucial time for all of us, time to fully assume our responsibility to prevent and to protect, time to act. This year has shown how fragile and endangered are human life, human identity, human heritage. We are grateful to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his commitment to sustain focus on the prevention agenda and for supporting the critical functions of early warning and early action, including the commitment to address hate speech at the national and global levels. I want to welcome Ms. Alice Wairimu Nederitu in her new capacity as Special Advisor of the Secretary General on the prevention of genocide, and to thank her and her predecessors for the consistent action towards driving forward the prevention agenda. I also thank Under-Secretary General for Global Communications, Ms. Melissa Fleming, for her participation and for supporting efforts aimed at raising awareness about the importance of remembrance and prevention of atrocity crimes. Finally, I want to thank our permanent mission in New York for bringing together an exceptional panel of humanitarians as part of the annual observance of the Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of the Crime of Genocide and International Human Rights Day. I thank you.
I thank Minister Ayvazyan for his statement. Today's virtual event will seek to debate the existing and emerging trends in mass media, communications, and culture, insofar as prevention of atrocities and their precursors is concerned, linking human rights, media communications, and humanitarian agendas. As it is known, crises, atrocities, and genocides do not occur overnight. They are detectable and predictable. Denial of past crimes, impunity, discrimination, and prevalence of hate speech are amongst the precipitating factors leading to massive crimes and conflict and represent explicit early warning signs. While the rise of digital technologies has enhanced access to knowledge and factual information, it has also enhanced opportunities for manipulation, misinformation, and proliferation of divisive narratives for political gains. The past few months have seen the largest military escalation in Nagorno-Karabakh conducted at the time of global pandemic and in parallel with unprecedented infodemic, resembling in a way the Armenian genocide that was perpetrated in 1915 under the cover of World War I. Sadly, too often mass media is used to promote hate speech, warmongering, and denialist narratives, or even worse, serving to justify or whitewash past atrocities, breeding culture of impunity and recurrent violence. Despite continuing efforts of international community to prevent genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, mass atrocities continue to persist, often preceded by a range of detectable warning signs. As the main sponsor of the UN General Assembly resolution instituting the International Day of 9th December, Armenia is fully committed to strengthening this important platform, most notably through thematic events held in observance of the day since its establishment in 2015. Indeed, the topic of today's panel is central to addressing the very many challenges and disturbing realities of our times in so many parts of the world. I'm very glad that today we are joined by Ms. Alice Wairimu Nederitu, the Special Advisor of the Secretary General on the Prevention of Genocide, and Ms. Melissa Fleming, the Under-Secretary General for Global Communications, whom I would like to thank for their important contribution to driving the prevention agenda forward. I would also like to warmly welcome our very special and distinguished panelists. Dr. Sarah Brown, Executive Director of Center for Holocaust, Human Rights, and Genocide Education. Dr. Brown has developed and managed the Eyewitness Program for Shoah Foundation, which provides access to more than 1,500 full lifetime histories, testimonies, or survivors and witnesses to the Holocaust and other genocides. We are very honored to have Ms. Terry George, award-winning film producer and director whose works include, among others, such movies like The Promise, Hotel Rwanda, Reservation Road. I'm thankful to David Phillips, director of Peacebuilding and Rights Program Institute for the Study of Human Rights at Columbia University, to be with us today. We have also Dr. Peter Balakian, professor of humanities at Colgate University, author of many award-winning books and recipient of Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. I'm very happy that Dr. Simon Adams could join us, who is the Executive Director of Global Center for Responsibility to Protect. And of course, Dr. Henry Thoreau, President of the International Association of Genocide Scholars and Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs at Worcester State University, who kindly agreed to moderate today's discussion. I now have the pleasure to invite Special Advisor of UN Secretary General on Prevention of Genocide, Ms. Alice Wairimu-Nderitu, to deliver her remarks. Please, Madam and Secretary General, Special Advisor.
Ambassador Muher, Mergarian, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start by thanking the Permanent Mission of Armenia for organizing this event to mark the 72nd anniversary of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide and the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of the Crime of Genocide and of the Prevention of this crime. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic of today's event on mass media and genocide prevention is very timely. Media plays a critical role in our societies. Independent, plural, diverse, and inclusive media helps to educate us and inform us how we view our societies and the world. It provides us with facts and helps to build leaders accountable. It can also be an important tool for populations at risk of atrocity crimes to make their voices heard and mobilize action for prevention. Likewise, the expansion of social media has provided opportunities to connect people in ways that were not possible just a few years ago, and provides us with a wealth of information and knowledge at our fingertips. Unfortunately, we are also witnessing the misuse of media, both traditional and social media, with a detrimental impact, including disseminating hate and promoting division among ethnic, religions, and national groups in various regions of the world, and in the most serious cases, contributing to incite violence or even genocide. Hate speech has been a precursor to atrocity crimes, from the Holocaust to the genocides in Rwanda and Srebrenica. In all these situations, media was a key tool used for the dissemination of hate speech, incitement, as well as dehumanizing and discriminatory rhetoric. Regrettably, over the past several years, there has been an exponential surge in the use and spread of hate speech, including xenophobia, racism, anti-Semitism, and anti-Muslim hatred. Social media has compounded this dangerous trend to alarming levels. We must do more to reverse this trend.
I have the pleasure now to give the floor to Ms. Melissa Fleming, the Undersecretary General for Global Communications, to address the panel. Please, Madam Undersecretary General.
Thank you. The department that I lead, the UN's Department of Global Communications, manages dedicated outreach programs on, for example, the Holocaust and the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, with both aiming to ensure that these atrocities will never happen again. Of course, this is easier said than done. We live in a time of increasing tensions, with some leaders willing to further divide us with inflammatory language and actions. And we live in an era of social media, when a single post or image, no matter how inaccurate or hateful, can travel at lightning speed around the world. Yet using mass media to encourage hatred and genocide is not a new phenomenon. We know that the Nazis in Germany, just like the Hutu extremists in power in Rwanda, were adept at using the media to isolate and marginalize those they considered less than human. In both cases, the messages of hatred were not hidden. They were evident in the language and tone used in the newspapers and in radio broadcasts. And in both cases, any voices of opposition were largely absent from the mass media, silenced by authoritarian regimes. These experiences and others, such as the actions of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia in the 1970s, show that words can have enormous destructive power. Indeed, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda recognized this in one case in which members of the media used the radio to sow hatred against Tutsis and others. The judges concluded this, quote, "Without a firearm, machete, or any other physical weapon, you caused the deaths of thousands of innocent civilians." Today, the same techniques, generalizations, name-calling, fear-mongering, and repetition of falsehoods are being used by those wanting to generate hatred, justify human rights breaches, and encourage violent acts. The tools might be slightly more sophisticated than before, but the basic approach is the same.
Now I have the pleasure to pass the floor to the moderator of today's discussion, the president of International Association of Genocide Scholars, Dr. Henry Thoreau. Thank you, Henry, once again for being with us today to steer this conversation. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Mergarian, and thank you to your mission for doing something that I think is a very important step in genocide prevention. As a people, as a country that has the experience of genocide 100 years ago, a century ago, to focus your attention with this program and in other ways on prevention in the future, I think really shows the kind of commitment we need. Unfortunately, there are many genocide victim groups around the world, some of whom whose tragedies are well known, and others who are very obscure. But one of the things that I've seen in group after group is a willingness and a commitment to take on the challenges that face other groups today as they're victims of violence, of mass violence, and so forth. And I appreciate that Armenia has taken the lead in this way. It moves this from a political issue to an ethical issue for your country, and I think for the world, and I appreciate that very much. I'd like to turn the program over to Dr. Brown, who will share her tremendous insights.
The concept note that drives today's panel really succinctly lays out the challenges and potential of mass media when addressing genocide prevention in our rapidly globalizing world. And as I considered both the promise as well as the peril of the digital age, I reflected on my own research and work and hope to share a bit of that with you today. Much of my own research focuses on the nefarious uses of mass media, in particular broadcast radio and print periodicals. These were the so-called mass media of the time in 1994 Rwanda, my area of research. And my work examines how they were harnessed to disseminate lies about the Tutsi and whip up fear and anger. Media mobilized and sensitized the population to violence. And extremist media outlets knowingly and deliberately targeted and demonized Tutsis as an ethnic other, thus promoting divisions between people that shared the same culture, language, religion, and country. Media popularized dehumanizing rhetoric about the Tutsi, referring to them as snakes and cockroaches, and the media encouraged patriotic Hutu Rwandans to take up arms against their friends, neighbors, and even family members. And they went on to deny the genocide even as it was occurring. That steady onslaught of image, print, and radio influences before and during the genocide invoked terror and anxiety, and the result was devastating. Over a period of less than 100 days, more than 1 million people were brutally murdered in what is now known as the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. This example embodies the peril of mass media, but I also want to share what occurred post-genocide and the myriad ways that mass media has been used to promote reconciliation and reconstruction in Rwanda and beyond, helping to prevent genocide worldwide. Even after the genocide in Rwanda, print periodicals, broadcast radio, and more recently and increasingly television, and of course, social media, have been used to rebuild the country and its people. Radio soap dramas like Musekeweya, which means New Dawn in Kinyarwanda, are transmitted and focus on positive psychological messages that help individuals resist hate speech and incitement to violence, and they also help to promote peaceful coexistence. Social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook have eliminated some of the bureaucratic barriers that were previously in place. They enable Rwandan citizens to directly reach their elected officials and address everything from damaged roads in need of repair to health, security, and post-genocide healing and commemorative practices. Mass media and mass communication technologies have also helped to foster a shared sense of community among Rwandans living in the diaspora who remain deeply vested in their home country. And it offers a space for vibrant and often passionate civic discourse and engagement. Moving to more current times, I must also note that in this year in particular, we have witnessed again the tremendous potential of mass media, in particular via virtual platforms, when it comes to innovative genocide prevention initiatives. We live in difficult times, politically charged and often fraught times, and at my center, the Center for Holocaust, Human Rights, and Genocide Education, we know firsthand that the need for meaningful and impactful education about genocide and human rights is all the more pressing today. For the past 41 years, we have worked to promote the elimination of anti-Semitism, racism, and all forms of prejudice through innovative education. And in normal times, pre-March 2020, these efforts would have included educational programming, our exhibit about the Armenian genocide, the Holocaust, and the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, our 6,000 volume library dedicated to Holocaust and genocide studies, and our Holocaust and genocide archives. But because of the pandemic, like many other organizations, we were forced to close our doors. It was not the time, though, to lose hope or choose the path of inaction. Instead, we continue our work, bridging the gap between the lessons learned from our genocide survivors and their surviving generations, and the lived experiences of our current leaders, and perhaps even more important, the next generation of leaders who sit in our classrooms today.
We'd like to actually move on to Terry George, and to open his segment, we've got queued up a short part of the film, The Promise. So I think that's ready to go. So we will turn that over, and then we'll be very excited to hear Mr. George's comments on that and his general comments as part of the panel.
Mr. Myers, I am Farouk Pasha, commander of this region. What is the Associated Press doing here, Mr. Myers?
Reporting on the war.
There is no war here. Merely the evacuation of the civilian population to a safer region. The gallant Armenian partisans of Van put up a heroic resistance against Turkish divisions, inflicting heavy casualties. Hardly objective reporting. This is my favorite. A Turkish official, a man of unshakable humanity and courage, informed us that Farouk Pasha, a general notorious for barbarism, has been instructed by the highest authorities to spare no village. Are these words your fabrications, or the words of some lying Turkish traitor? Prove to me that you did not fabricate these words. Give me the name of the high-ranking Turkish official. I will confirm he gave you this information and release you.
No.
You are not a journalist. You are a foreign agent. You insist there is war here? Very well. under the military code of war, I'm obliged to execute you as a foreign agent and a collaborator. Now, was that my barbarism or mercy? Take it.
I feel that that drama, particularly the medium of film and documentary, is possibly one of the most powerful weapons that we have against genocide, because it creates a barrier to hate. It creates a barrier to cruelty. It creates a barrier to extremism when you have a sense of what the other person is. And I do worry today that the emphasis, particularly in the medium of film and television, has moved away from nonfiction drama towards fantasy, and that this it stops us producing literature and film and television that will help create empathy. And I want to appeal to the audience itself and to everyone to encourage the promotion of a cinema, particularly, which is under siege today because of the pandemic. Within the medium that I work, we're not sure that when we emerge from this pandemic that the actual institution of cinema and theaters will exist in the way it did before. And yet it's essential to the cause of human rights and the cause of understanding what goes on in nations around the world. And I think that sense, and it's also, and the other panelists mentioned this, it's extremely important in combating the hate speech on social media and so forth, which is created often in isolation. I feel that there's a lack of community, that people are sitting alone and creating fear, creating hate speech, creating this notion that that truths are not to be believed, that science is not to be believed, that what you see before your eyes indeed is not to be believed. And so I think it's important for all of us to understand today that the use of drama in the cause that we fight for is essential. And that requires active participation. That requires people asking their cinemas, asking their television stations, asking or subscribing to important nonfiction drama and important documentaries, that we sponsor these forms of education, and that we actively go out of our way to ensure that not only that they exist, but that they make a profit, that they're supported. Because if they don't make a profit, they will quickly die off. It's much easier to create the fictional superhero with the CGI and enhance it than it is to make a Schindler's List, or to make a Holocaust television series, or to make The Killing Fields. And therefore, all of us together have to actively campaign that we will support this form of drama and support, the literature that Peter Balakian puts out. We are in a campaign to support each other here. And the purpose of that campaign is to promote empathy, understanding. And no better way to get understanding than to create drama that gets inside the lives of
Our next speaker is David Phillips, so I'd like to turn the floor over to him and eagerly await his remarks.
The 20th century was the bloodiest century in human history. It started with the genocide of Armenians in the Ottoman Empire between 1915 and 1923, when up to 1.5 million people were deported and killed. Raphael Lemkin, who authored the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, said the term genocide specifically referred to the mass killings of Armenians in the Ottoman Empire. He urged Turkey to sign the Genocide Convention as a form of recognition. Sadly, Turkey to this day is fully committed to its denial campaign, which is unrelenting. A second Armenian genocide was launched on September 27th of this year in Artsakh, also known as Nagorno-Karabakh, when Azerbaijani armed forces, supported by Turkish drones and warplanes and jihadist mercenaries, brought to Nagorno-Karabakh from Syria by Turkey, attacked lands that were long inhabited by Armenians. These events, both historical and recent, are interrelated. Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan affirmed their connection, vowing, "We will continue to fulfill our duties in the Caucasus, to which our ancestors have been committed for centuries." In addition to its tragic toll on human lives, the ongoing conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan has an information war component. Neither country has an official cyber army. However, Armenian government and Armenian websites have been targeted with cyber attacks. Those perpetrating the targeting seek to spread disinformation in order to justify aggression and atrocities. Azerbaijan's social media campaign violates established guidelines of social media companies. Twitter maintains in its charter, you may not threaten violence against an individual or a group of people. We also prohibit the glorification of violence. Instagram also affirms graphic violence is not allowed, and we may remove videos or images of intense graphic violence to make sure that Instagram stays appropriate for everyone. According to the spokesperson for Facebook, the company waited a year to open investigations on the ruling political party of Azerbaijan that, quote, utilized thousands of inauthentic assets to harass the opposition and to defend the country's governing New Azerbaijan Party by working with the party's youth union. Facebook's head of security points out, this network appeared to engage individuals in Azerbaijan to manage pages with the sole purpose of leaving supportive and critical commentary on the pages of international and local media, public figures, including opposition, and the ruling party of Azerbaijan, to create a perception of widespread criticism of some views and widespread support of others. A disinformation campaign that was organized and systematically executed. On October 8th, Facebook deleted 589 accounts. Nearly 8,000 pages were also deleted, as were 447 accounts on Instagram that were engaged in, quote, inauthentic behavior. What's meant by this term? Lies that are organized and sponsored by the state. Not only does Azerbaijan spend a fortune on US-based public relations firms, it also sponsors an online disinformation campaign. Pro-Azerbaijan hashtags are heavily manipulated, with a small group of high-volume accounts responsible for most mentions. Rather than being fully automated bots, they are curated by dedicated human users belonging to pro-regime youth groups. Roughly 1 million pro-Azerbaijan comments on social media were registered between July 12th and the 18th. They were tagged with inflammatory titles such as "Stop Armenian Terrorism," "Stop Armenian Aggression," "Armenia Kills Civilians," "Don't Believe Armenia," "Armenia Kills Children," "Pray for Ganja," "Stop Armenian Lies," and "Terrorist Armenia." Online propaganda also seeks to harass defenders of Armenia and Artsakh. The Armenian rapper Cardi B and Elton John were attacked for supporting the people of Artsakh. Cardi B admitted that a lot of people from Azerbaijan wrote to her and used the hashtag Cardi B supports terrorism on social media. When Columbia University hosted a discussion with Armenia's ambassador to the United States, in the span of 10 minutes, we received 150 messages, orchestrated and all similar in their nature, urging Columbia to pull the plug and stop the program. Azerbaijan's entrenched state propaganda apparatus has long used computational disinformation and patriotic trolling. Across all of the top pro-Azerbaijan hashtags, dozens of accounts tweeted well over 1,000 times between July 14 and 18, with some accounts posting over 100 times a day. As Azerbaijan's political astroturfing operation is run by a small coordinated group of accounts that post at a high volume to create the impression that the online movement has more organic support than it actually does. A great proportion of hyperactive accounts were engaged during the period just prior to Azerbaijan's attack on September 27, suggesting they were orchestrated to support Azerbaijan's premeditated aggression. So any claim that violence was spontaneous can be refuted by the systematic use of social media to prepare the groundwork for propaganda. Most of these profiles were anonymous, featuring pictures of the Azerbaijan flag or other national symbols, with no biographical information on the posters. Evidence also exists of systematic retweeting by, for example, the General Union to Youth for Support, a youth organization created in 2019 to boost President Ilham Aliyev's youth development policy. Propaganda is also conducted by Azerbaijani officials. Aliyev's foreign policy advisor, Hikmet Hajiev, circulated fake images as a military analysis. He circulated the image of a Smerch missile that landed in an Azeri kitchen. The missile hit a table, but didn't destroy the table or explode, leading to speculation that the image was photoshopped. It's my view that it surely was. Azerbaijan's information warfare is also directed against Azerbaijani citizens. The pro-regime youth movement, İreli, is known to operate on many different accounts, harassing journalists and critics of the regime. It also runs a, quote, social media academy to train youth in propaganda. İreli was originally funded and sponsored by the Azerbaijani government, using its oil wealth derived from the sale of hydrocarbons to Western markets. Freedom House documents Baku's control over the information and communications technology industry. The Azeri government manipulates the online information landscape, blocking websites that host unfavorable news coverage. Digital rights are abused in Azerbaijan. Those who voice dissent online can expect prosecution if they reside in the country, or various forms of intimidation if they live abroad. According to the Azerbaijan Internet Forum, Internet users in Georgia and Russia enjoy to 10 to 20 times the internet speeds of their Azeri counterparts. Columbia University's president, Lee Bollinger, expressed concern that, quote, social networking's most dangerous human impact is that it can create more polarization, generating increasingly less room for debate and constructive discussions, which threatens our social fabric and democracy itself. Listening to the panelists, we all have one thing in common. Our work is devoted to bearing witness. To ensure fair and balanced information, the Institute for the Study of Human Rights at Columbia University recently launched a website titled ArtSoc Atrocities, in conjunction with the ArtSoc Human Rights Ombudsman. The site includes credible reports by the ArtSoc and Armenian Human Rights Ombudsman, news articles, opinion pieces, statements by the International Committee of the Red Cross, and other authoritative humanitarian and human rights voices, as well as videos, including some with gruesome imagery, as well as documentation of Azerbaijan and terror groups targeting churches and cultural symbols. The ArtSoc Atrocities page is a counterweight to Azerbaijan's propaganda infrastructure. It represents an effort by Columbia University to make sure that the voices of Armenian victims are heard. We are routinely attacked by Azerbaijani propagandists. Not a day goes by when I don't receive some kind of hate message for my advocacy on behalf of Armenian victims. I already mentioned that when we hosted the Armenian ambassadors, we were assaulted by hundreds of messages condemning our work. These messages not only complain about Columbia's advocacy, they fundamentally object to the term ArtSoc, which to me is rather remarkable, since these are traditional Armenian lands, and this is the traditional Armenian term to them. The Azeri government and its propagandists act like other perpetrators. We heard from Terry George reference to different genocides. In most, the perpetrators first deny. When confronted with evidence, they question its credibility. When they claim that injuries were self-inflicted or that victims groups perpetrated the identical or worse crimes against them. All of this in an attempt to obfuscate the truth, to rewrite history, and to prevent consequences for their actions. We believe that the information that we provide on the ArtSoc Atrocities webpage not only memorializes the truth, it also serves as a resource for enhancing accountability. And we hope that it will be used by prosecutors when the perpetrators of these war crimes are brought before a tribunal and have to face justice. Thank you very much.
Our final panelist, who is definitely a last but by no means least person here, Dr. Simon Adams. Dr. Adams, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Henry, our esteemed moderator, and thank you, of course, to Ambassador Mergarian and to the permanent mission of Armenia for organizing today's event. I think we've all witnessed the potential negative impact social media can have on our daily lives, including on the perception of truth, politics, and our common humanity. But I think the expansion of digital communications and social media has also quite obviously allowed us to communicate and connect across borders more easily than at any other time in human history. And again, I think it's that duality of threat and promise, which should remain absolutely central to our understanding of the importance of mass media today. And in this context, let me say that atrocity crimes never happen in a social vacuum, nor are they isolated or random incidents. genocide and other mass atrocity crimes are preceded by a range of early warning signs. And I think one of the most important of those is the proliferation of hate speech. Hate speech, you know, as we all know, is speech that marginalizes and targets people on the basis of their religion, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, race. Or in other words, it's language that demonizes people, not for anything that they have done, but for who they are. And this was a point that I was glad to see that USG Fleming also made, which is that the propagation of hate speech has taken many forms throughout history as media platforms have evolved. So the Nazis used virulently anti-Semitic newspapers like Die Stürmer to try and incite the German people into the active persecution of Jews. 5 decades later, during the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, the RTLM radio station played a key role in promoting hate speech against the Tutsi, inciting the genocide, and in fact, even directing the killers with the names of potential victims who were hiding and had yet to be discovered. And more recently, I think from ISIS to Myanmar's generals, social media has become the tool of choice that has been weaponized to target the other and to incite atrocities. And in this new digital era, I think Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and other platforms are not just places for, you know, information sharing, for discussions about the Great British Baking Show, you know, and for social networking. They are places where vilification, targeting, and incitement take place. And I think a very disturbing example is Myanmar, where in 2017, the military systematically utilized Facebook as a tool in their persecution of the Rohingya minority, something that's been recognized in documentation currently in front of the International Court of Justice in The Hague as part of a historic case alleging that Myanmar breached its obligations under the Genocide Convention. However, you know, just as propaganda and hate speech can be disseminated via mass media, these platforms can also be a crucial element in the prevention of atrocities. These platforms can help cultivate an inclusive public discourse. They can compel humanitarian responses. They can address early warning signs of potential atrocities. So I think we need to harness the potential of social media in particular as a tool for atrocity prevention instead of allowing it to simply be manipulated for malignant purposes. How do we do that? Technology and social media companies need to move beyond ad hoc responses to the ways in which their platforms are being misused. All of these companies, all of them, should employ experts to tackle the problem on their platforms and establish designated staff for monitoring human rights and for hate speech. Governments and multilateral bodies must increase pressure on Facebook, on Twitter, and other platforms to actively stop hate speech from being propagated on networks that operate in their country. And I think the UN Plan of Action and Strategy on Hate Speech provides very strong practical recommendations in this regard. Because I think hate speech is always about forging identities amongst both the targeted and also amongst those who do the targeting. Identities are redefined and they're weaponized, but that means, again, that they can also be contested and that they can also be disrupted. And of course, the upside to the expansion of mass media and digital communications is that it has also allowed us to peer behind closed borders and has given us the potential to expose the crimes of perpetrators like never before. Evidence of what is happening in the darkest dungeon beside the most remote mass grave or inside any killing zone is just one click of an iPhone away. And so I'd like to end by saying that just as not all media is malignant, not all content is equal, there should be no space on any mass media or any social media platform for genocide deniers or for those who want to use those platforms to incite violence and to promote the politics of the machete or the concentration camp or the mass grave. But because I think the antidote to hate speech is speech that promotes and protects everyone's human rights. And in these times of global crisis, with an unprecedented 80 million people around the world currently displaced by persecution, by conflict, and by atrocities. We need mass media who do what it does best, which is to tell uncomfortable truths, expose unconscionable crimes, and report on conflict and human rights in ways that mobilizes empathy and action rather than promoting apathy and indifference to human suffering. Thank you.
Dear friends, our program will end with a musical performance by an award-winning talented pianist, Karina Pogosian, who many of our New York colleagues will remember from her beautiful concerts at the Carnegie Hall. Since the lockdown in New York, Ms. Pogosian launched a weekly concert series available on her Facebook page. Karina, thank you very much for being with us today at this solemn occasion. We will listen to the classical piece written by a world-renowned composer, Aram Khachaturian, which will conclude today's virtual event. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the music and stay safe. All the best. Over to you, Karina.